And the Supreme Court is set to quickly consider if President Trump has the power to impose sweeping tariffs. Justices granted the Trump administration's request for a speedy review and plan to hear oral arguments in November. The case centers around a law that allows the president to impose economic sanctions to combat an unusual and extraordinary threat. And it could have major implications for the economy and the power of the president. ABC News contributor and Hofstra law professor James Samples here with more. Hi, James. Thanks for coming on. So this is a very fast briefing schedule. What do you make of the court granting this review to begin with?
Well, Diane, it's great to be with you as always. And this is indeed a fast briefing schedule. And I think that in terms of your question, I think that the court recognizes that this is a matter of extraordinary importance. It's a matter of extraordinary importance to the economy and extraordinary importance vis-a-vis separation of powers and the constitutional scheme. This is a huge case in every single sense of the term. The Constitution gives Congress the power to tax and gives Congress the power to set tariffs. Congress, however, can delegate that power to the president. And the question before the court is whether this statute, known as IEPA, that you laid out for us already, gives the president emergency powers that include the power to unilaterally impose the sweeping tariffs that are at issue here. That statute before the Trump administration had never, in its 50 years of existence, ever been used to impose tariffs by the president. So this is a major separation of powers case, and it is a major case in terms of the massive economic impact of the tariffs, whether they are upheld or struck down.
Is there any sense of which way the justices lean on this?
You know, it's a good question, and the lower courts here, both lower courts, the Court of International Trade, which deals with trade and tariff matters normally, and then the Federal Circuit Court of Appeals, the Federal Circuit, both of those courts struck down the tariffs but stayed their ruling pending the Supreme Court potentially, and now it has, stepping in. So the two lower courts, both of those rulings were very persuasive and very powerful rebukes of the president's authority to impose these tariffs, saying that if Congress wanted the president to have this power, Congress would have said so. There's a doctrine known as the major questions doctrine. It's in fact the doctrine that the conservative majority on the court used to strike down former President Biden's student loan forgiveness scheme, saying that if Congress wanted to make a major decision, like allowing the forgiveness of student loans on an emergency basis, Congress would have given the president that power and done so expressly. This particular decision will present the justices who were in that majority with a really compelling question of whether or not this particular authority, the tariff authority, is itself subject to that same major questions doctrine. If the court finds that it is, then they would strike down the tariffs. This is a case, Diane, that really scrambles our normal left-right, blue-red, Democrat-Republican kind of leanings. The opponents of the tariffs who are challenging these tariffs in court and who have so far been successful are largely business organizations and conservative groups like the Cato Institute, who, apart from whether they support or oppose the tariffs on a policy ground, say that this poses a serious separation of powers concern if the president can just usurp Congress's authority.
So what's at stake here? What's the big picture impact of this decision?
Billions and billions and billions of dollars are at stake, in the sense that the tariffs that have been imposed, 90 foreign countries, not every single tariff imposed on every single product is subject to this particular litigation, but tariffs involving products from 90 countries, basically those that don't involve steel, automobiles, and some national security related products. So we're talking about the price of those goods, and we're talking about a massive, massive influx of revenue and a massive imposition of costs on the American consumer being decided by the Supreme Court based on whether the president has the authority to do this on his own or needs Congress's approval.
And James, I also want to ask you about another case. A federal appeals court has paused a ruling that found the Trump administration's use of federal troops in Los Angeles unlawful. So what happens in the meantime, and what are you watching for next there?
That particular ruling is staggering in the sense that critics of the ruling are saying that it basically allows ICE to engage in racial profiling, that the factors that ICE is using, including ethnicity or appearance of ethnicity, whether or not an individual is speaking a foreign language or even has an accent, is working a low-wage job, or is in areas where immigrants often congregate. The critics say that the Supreme Court has basically stepped in and authorized ICE and authorized the administration to engage in racial profiling as part of its anti-illegal immigration efforts. That case was paused by this. That ruling was issued by the Supreme Court on Monday without any written decision whatsoever. Justice Kavanaugh wrote solely for himself in a 6-3 ruling, but he's the only justice in the majority who wrote an opinion at all. So there's not much for the lower courts to go on, except for the fact that the court reversed the judgment of the lower courts, which had restrained those activities, that kind of profiling, as unconstitutional. Justice Sonia Sotomayor wrote a blistering dissent saying that this is one of the most shameful decisions that the court has issued in many, many decades, and that it will go down as similar to decisions like those decisions that the Supreme Court engaged in upholding numerous racist practices, including even the internment of Japanese Americans during the World War II period.
All right, James Sample, always great to have you on. Thank you.
Thank you.